Video games are always evolving. Video games are sometimes evolving, and that's especially true for long-standing franchises where innovation is essential to keep fans from getting, well, a bit bored. But there are plenty of franchises that just completely changed the game. Today's beloved video game franchises started out life as one genre and then changed things up entirely, whether temporarily or permanently, whether for good or for bad or MOBA. Bear in mind, I'm not really going to talk about spin-offs here, because then you could get into Mario stuff and we'd be here all day. The guy's been a plumber, a footballer, an Italian. Let's start with Joan Collins's favourite fighting game. Dynasty Warriors, or Dynasty Warriors if your bread is sugared, is the most well-known hack-and-slash 1 versus 1000 game series where your brain does other stuff while Lubu goes brrr. But the original Dynasty Warriors game was nothing like the series that came afterwards. Originally debuting as a fighting game on the PS1 in 1997, the first Dynasty Warriors was still based on the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, but focused on 1v1 brawling instead of carving a way through platoons of troops. Many were surprised when the game was first revealed at the 1996 PlayStation Expo and that Koei would develop something that wasn't another strategy/simulation game. Like a gunshot revealed via the power of dance, it was even more surprising when Koei again changed the series completely despite the positive reaction to the first game. When the series did re-emerge with the sequel as a PS2 launch game outside of Japan, the fighting game genre was ditched in favour of hack and slash, and the main series hasn't really looked back since. That doesn't mean there haven't been innovations and slight genre shifts throughout the series. The Empire series gives DW a bit more strategy focus, while Dynasty Warriors 9 added a much maligned open world twist to the series. The most recent game, Dynasty Warriors Origins, overhauled the series again, with it telling the story of how Lu Bu beat your dad up and took his lunch money. No, not quite. While it's still telling the same Romance of the Three Kingdoms stories, that's just the backdrop to a new story about a mysterious warrior and a secret clan guiding the future of China. It's also the best reviewed and highest selling game in the series for a long time, so the future seems to be brighter than ever. Brighter than 1,000 suns, perhaps. That was a nuke joke because of Duke Nukem? Subscribe. Duke Nukem is largely known as a first-person shooter series, but the Duke himself has had more genres than he's had quips or genital warts. Okay, that's not really true, as Mr. Nukem never seems to shut up or rubber up, but if you think that Duke's video game appearances begin and end with FPS games, you're sorely mistaken, friend. In fact, the series started life as a platformer, with Duke Nukem and Duke Nukem 2 releasing on the MS-DOS in 1991 and 1993 respectively. Both games were well liked enough, but in the time between the original game's launch and 1996, games like Wolfenstein 3D and Doom had given players the taste of first-person shooting, and it was time for Duke to add some dimension to his character. Duke Nukem 3D would ultimately catapult the red-vested one to superstardom, with high critical reception and enough commercial interest to greenlight several console spin-offs like Time to Kill, 0 Hour, and Land of the Babes. All three of those games returned Duke to more platformy but still shooty roots, launching on the PS1 or N64 depending on the game between 1998 and 2000, when they'd receive steadily worse review scores. Again though, those were spin-offs, and the diminished critical reception wouldn't matter when the long-awaited 3D sequel was going to drop soon. Am I right, guys? Yes, that's right. Duke Nukem Forever would overtake Ocarina of Time as the best reviewed game of all time. No, it actually became the poster child for development hell, and while it did return the series to the world of first-person shooting, it also was an unmitigated dumpster fire. Still got better reviews than Land of the Babes though, in fairness. We did also get that cancelled PS2 game that turned up recently called Duke Nukem D-Day. Did you see that? I'd love to do a video on this guy's cancelled games one day because he's got like 100 of them. Now, if I was to sit here and go through the Final Fantasy series, including all the spin-offs and tie-ins and extra stuff and all that goodness, we wouldn't just need a compilation of Final Fantasy, we need a bloody library. Fortunately for us, the mainline Final Fantasy series, meaning anything numbered, has gone through a variety of changes over the years, and while they all broadly fit the category of an RPG, the differences are staggering. However, it took years for Final Fantasy to really evolve its mostly turn-based formula beyond switching between active time battle and conditional turn-based battle. 2002's Final Fantasy XI offered the first big change in the formula, turning the single-player RPG into an MMO, following in the successful footsteps of Phantasy Star Online for the Dreamcast. That's another franchise that could appear in a sequel video, so let us know if you want that down in the comments. Final Fantasy XI proved to be a massive success for Square, becoming known at one point as the most profitable Final Fantasy game of all time, and inspired them to make another MMO in Final Fantasy XIV. That one wasn't immediately successful, to put it lightly, though a relaunch, refocus, and several beloved expansions have made Final Fantasy XIV a new MMO gold standard for many. Offline though, Square would play with the formula still, dropping turn-based in Final Fantasy XII for active dimension battle where you issue commands in real time. 15 and 16, along with the 7 remake trilogy, are more action-focused too, and while all of these more action-focused games reviewed pretty well, the recent success of games like Clair Obscur Expedition 33, or a Whisper, Persona, Metaphor, and other traditional turn-based games has made some fans wonder if Final Fantasy can switch back to turn-based soon, not unlike a dragon. The mirror opposite to Final Fantasy, the Yakuza / Like a Dragon series started out life as Sega's Shenmue successor, a slice-of-life simulator with realistic worlds and larger-than-life characters. The first game on PS2 wasn't exactly the most well-reviewed game ever made, particularly in the West, but Japan bloody loved this blend of crime drama and beat-em-up gameplay, so Sega just kept making them, and culture hasn't looked back since. Sure, subsequent games in the series were also ported to the West, but they weren't really selling too well until Yakuza 0, which has largely been credited as the game in the series that kicked off the West's love affair with Yakuza. Despite finally hitting a winning formula though, RGG Studio decided to take a big risk and change up the genre entirely. 2020's Yakuza Like a Dragon sparked a new era for the series, introducing a brand new protagonist and a whole new style of gameplay, ditching the real-time beat-em-up action for a turn-based RPG akin to Dragon Quest. The reason for the change in gameplay was to fit the new protagonist, who in the universe is a huge fan of Dragon Quest. Naturally, he sees all battles as turn-based instead of real-time. It both makes sense and doesn't, but either way, most were pretty receptive to the new change in genre. Beat-em-up fans didn't have to worry though, as RGG would also introduce games like Judgment and Like a Dragon Gaiden, which brought back the real-time brawling fans had become accustomed to. Like a Dragon is the premier example of a franchise having its cake and eating it, also pivoting the genre entirely while ensuring fans of the old style are still catered for. They even just had one game where you were a pirate. Yakuza is so crazy, right, that Sega will just go, okay, you're a pirate, now go beat up that bear, and Yakuza fans will just be like, say no more, bashing the credit card. You should feel guilty about getting a bit lost in the Yakuza timeline though. Let's take things up a gear. The rock and metal inspired Guilty Gear series created by Daisuke Ishiwatari is a pretty well-known fighting game franchise. Sure, it might not have the same mainstream appeal as the likes of Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, but ever since Arc System Works introduced those gorgeous cel-shaded graphics to Guilty Gear Xrd, Sign, and Strive, Guilty Gear is bound to catch even the casual's eye. There's a reason Arc System used those graphics for pretty much every fighting game they make these days, including that new Marvel one that sounds like a past tense Tekken. Even this staunch fighting game series isn't immune to a few dalliances though, and while we could talk about spin-offs like 2D beat-em-up Judgment for the PSP or the 4-player party brawler Iska, there's a mainline sequel that's wilder than all of them. Enter Guilty Gear 2 Overture. Set a few years after the events of the first Guilty Gear, Overture took arguably the strangest genre switch of all time by going from a fighting game to a MOBA. Yes, that's correct. MOBA. For context, Overture launched in Japan in 2007 and 2008 in the rest of the world, and at the time the only properly released MOBA you could play was either Defense of the Ancients, or you had to go really old school and play games like Herzog Zwei on the Genesis. Overture beats out League of Legends by over a full calendar year, and it still hasn't even come over to consoles, but here's Overture proving that MOBAs could work on consoles before the genre even had a proper name. Well, proving is a strong word, as critics kinda hated Overture, and series fans are still debating whether or not the game is good, but the idea alone was massively ahead of its time. Should they run it back? As tabletop games go, Shadowrun has to be up there for one of the best fits for a video game adaptation. Magic? Check. Crime? Check. A mystical talking dog spirit? Hell yeah, brother. Shadowrun on the SNES began a pretty interesting run of video games for the IP. We got a more open Mega Drive game in 1994, while 1996 saw the release of a Sega Mega CD game with manga stylings that peculiarly never left Japan. They were all RPGs, and they all made some kind of sense. And that was that for basically a decade. Shadowrun still went along strong as a tabletop series. Microsoft bought Shadowrun digital rights holders Fassa Interactive in 1999 and then just seemed to stuff Shadowrun down the back of their couch alongside Galleon and Grabbed by the Ghoulies. Until 2007, when somebody with donkey brains decided to adapt it into a class-based multiplayer FPS video game for PC and Xbox 360 with no RPG elements or single-player campaign. Even Brink had a campaign. Brink! Yes, the bright sparks at Fassa and Microsoft decided that the pen and paper cyber sci-fi hybrid would and should definitely break into the Mountain Dew crowd, and also that crowd would definitely spend $60 for the privilege of playing as an elf with a katana. That does sound quite sick, actually. It does sound quite sick. While the game was certainly fun in short bursts, the critical meh-ling it received, the poor value proposition, and the lack of role-playing made Shadowrun 07 into a bit of a flop. People who wanted to play Counter-Strike would just play Counter-Strike. It was unique though in that Xbox Live and PC players could play each other via crossplay, as long as they'd taken their jabs that made them immune to games for Windows. Fassa Interactive was shut down in September 2007, and we'd finally get a more traditional RPG experience with Shadowrun Returns in 2013. Also, slightly interestingly, Shadowrun 2007 concluded a run of 4 consecutive games in the same series, each having the same name. Has that ever been done before? I don't think it has. Alright, next up, this one is technically a spin-off, but considering how historically and canonically interesting it is, I think I had to include it here today. Originally developed by Westwood in 1995, Command & Conquer was a staple of the strategy genre for the longest time. It's the one strategy franchise that people hoped would make a big comeback, perhaps more than anything else, only for it to actually come back as a mobile game that players roundly rejected. A pro-gamer move there, EA. Though, if the series did come back, which version of it would return? Like Megami Tensei for people who get excited about camo, Command & Conquer is split between Tiberian, Red Alert, and Generals, each with their own storyline, world, and slight gameplay tweaks to set them apart from each other. Functionally though, they are all strategy games. Except for one. Nestled amongst the chaos and tyranny of the Tiberian timeline is Command & Conquer Renegade, a shooter set during the events of the first game in the series. You control GDI soldier Nick Havoc Parker as he wages war against the Brotherhood of Nod, with players able to choose between first and third person viewpoints depending on their preference, and there's a healthy selection of weapons, armour and vehicles at your disposal too. Renegade was even developed by Westwood Studio themselves, and was their last Command & Conquer game before their liquidation by EA not long after the launch of their long forgotten Earth and Beyond MMO. Another pro-gamer move from EA. As for Westwood's penultimate release, critics found Renegade to be a pretty fun FPS in the C&C world, but for whatever reason, EA never revisited the FPS idea with Command & Conquer. I bet it has something to do with about 95% of people not knowing that Renegade even existed. If nothing else, they did something Blizzard couldn't with StarCraft Ghost. I bet that had an effect on the Irvine campus. Resident Evil and Silent Hill might have had the run of the survival horror genre during the PS1 and PS2 era, but that doesn't mean that other survival horror games weren't allowed to exist in that space. Take Fear Effect and Fear Effect 2, for instance, 2 survival horror-ish shooters that managed to blend cyberpunk futures with supernatural horror and ladies kissing ladies. Both games were given pretty decent critical receptions, with the first and second game both receiving a pretty even Metacritic rating, and there were plans in place to develop a third game in the series for the PS2, but for one reason or another, the series just fell into obscurity. Fans kept loving the series despite the lack of new entries though, leading to Sushi, Forever Entertainment, and the Square Enix Collective to just about kickstart and eventually create Fear Effect Sedna in 2018. Considering that Fear Effect 2 was a prequel, Sedna finally moved the series along after over 15 years, but it's how Sedna moved the series along that really courted controversy. Instead of simply just making another survival horror / RE clone, Fear Effect Sedna became an isometric stealth action game, with players utilising the different abilities of the various characters in order to progress through the levels, but usually falling asleep before they got to the end of them. Yeah, Sedna isn't going to be given like a Razzie-like award for worst game ever made or anything, but the sharp genre change proved to be a divisive one. Most fans kinda hated the story, writing, voice acting, general gameplay, main menu, fonts, credits, and while Sedna does have some defenders, it's become seen as a rather disappointing full stop on an otherwise beloved retro franchise. I mean, I don't think Sedna was supposed to be a full stop. It sold so poorly and had such little interest that it basically put a full stop on the entire series, and now we've only got like the limited run games, like basic ass ports to look forward to. Next up, let's talk about Wolfenstein. Somebody has to these days, right? Now you might be wondering to yourself, what genre change did Wolfenstein go through, and also, what is under that man's hat? I'm not talking about male pattern boldness or how the series became a co-op shooter with the much maligned Youngblood. Blech. Sure, it might have been a bit of a change from previous games in the series, but at the end of the day, Wolfenstein has always been an FPS series, or has it? Wolfenstein 3D might have been the godfather of the FPS genre as a whole, but it wasn't the first Wolfenstein game ever made. That honour would go to Castle Wolfenstein in 1981. Developed by Muse Software for various platforms including the Apple II, Atari 8-bit, Commodore 64 and MS-DOS, Castle Wolfenstein was a top-down stealth game where you control an unnamed American soldier as he tries to sneak through the most famous castle in gaming history. Interestingly, the 60 rooms of Castle Wolfenstein were procedurally generated, meaning a whole new game every time you played. Castle Wolfenstein would be followed by a sequel beyond Castle Wolfenstein, though Wolfenstein Fury Road sadly never got anywhere. Much like how Wolfenstein 3D was considered the forefather of FPS games, it's possible that the modern stealth genre wouldn't be what it is today without the existence of Castle Wolfenstein. Imagine blazing a trail into completely opposing genres. Wolfenstein is just simply built different. Finally today, a series that has been left on red for way too long. Confession time, we just really wanted an excuse to talk about Red Faction finally, as we barely bring it up on the channel. Consider this mistake rectified. If it wasn't for Saints Row or even The Punisher, you could make the very compelling case that Red Faction is the most famous series from Volition, which just speaks to the talent they had to offer. Rest in peace, you beautiful bastards. While Volition, or Parallax Software as they were originally known, got their start developing Descent and Summoner, hell yes, Summoner, it was Red Faction that catapulted them into becoming a more mainstream name. A first-person shooter with a genuinely innovative and impressive destruction system for the time, both Red Faction and its banger of a sequel are considered among the best PS2 shooters ever made. Considering that library includes the likes of Time Splitters, Black and even the first Killzone, Red Faction deserves its place among the greats. After a few years off, though, Volition would revisit the revolution on Mars once again with Red Faction Guerrilla. Instead of another first-person shooter, series fans would instead find an open-world action-adventure game similar in a way to Saints Row. Compared to other open-world games, Red Faction Guerrilla did feel more like a third-person shooter with open-world elements, though the series' trademark destruction was retained, seeing buildings crumble into dust with a massive hammer on a much larger scale than what had really been seen before made Guerrilla a real statement piece on the 360 and PS3. Critics and fans would broadly agree. So, obviously, Volition, THQ and new co-publishers Sci-Fi ditched the open-world gameplay in 2011's Armageddon, a less loved sequel and incredibly linear bona fide Gears of War clone that would ultimately cause the series to come to a premature end. Barring a remaster here and there, Red Faction is pretty much gone for good. Oh, Armageddon, I still miss you, babe, and I don't want to miss a compilation of all the Red Faction games, please. If you have that, going, I'd love one of them, please. Outro gang, thanks for coming, and thanks to all our beautiful members who have assembled here. You can do so the same, also that membering, for 99 pence or cents. Down below, comment, link, click, you know. Cheers. I've had a long day, it's really warm. Thanks for watching. I'm shifting genre to another video.